is on? Okay. Yeah, Nishtha, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I have a couple of questions, and then we'll throw it open to the audience. And if there's time, I have a couple more questions. Firstly, before any questions, I wanted to say it's a real visual and auditory treat. It's very beautiful. It's beautifully shot, and the sound is so richly layered. It's lovely to watch and to hear, and it's a real sensory treat. My first question is that you have your first interview coming in at around 20 minutes or so? And that it's like a voiceover interview. You don't actually show the person. And throughout the film, that the interviews are much fewer than the just the immersive visual and oral. So was that a decision you'd taken early on? Was it something that came to you later?
No, I mean, actually we did a lot of interviews, but there was a big problem in the sense that it's extremely noisy in the mill, so we could not talk to people in the mill area per se. So we tried a lot, and then a lot of the interviews that I did finally were, there is one day when the mill is closed, 1 or 2 days, and we happened to be there on that one day. And I think it was August 15th or something like that, and so therefore it was closed. So the mill wasn't working, and so we took these interviews. But later, I found it very difficult to amalgamate, a closed mill, like the machines are stopped with this. And then there were also another consideration that some of the workers are still working in the mill, and then after they had spoken, you know how people would speak their heart out, and then they would be like, one guy came and said, please don't use my stuff, just in case he loses his job or something. So then I just said that whoever was comfortable with, not criticizing, because they still had the jobs and they needed the jobs. So I put a lot of them in voiceover, because most of them are talking about, largely about, wages and, dues, etc. So I kept that as an audio layer. But they were, I mean, even if I were not going to use them in a film, I do a lot of interviews, and then I don't use them. Because it sort of, warms up the people, and they get to say what they needed to say, and then we decide what the film is going to be. So.
Yeah, and you quite cleverly, the sound design is also very inventive. You go into silences every now and then, and maybe one of the reasons for that was because the audio, it's impossible to catch audio. That's very effective. It's very, it works very well. So is that, I know you wrestled with putting the film together for a long time, for many years, and perhaps that was not only to do with funding. I'm sure that must have been part of the reason. Was part of your struggle also trying to figure out, I know in our earlier conversation you said the film has always been about the workers for you, but because there's so many shots of the machines, and it's very beautifully shot, and it's very evocative. Was that part of the struggle, the idea of whether... No? Okay.
No,
maybe you want to say more about that?
The struggle was that, when it came to editing, it was the COVID year. Yeah. And the funding, co-production funding, has to be spent in their countries. So because it's really meant to, it's not really for your film, but it's really for their artists. And because of COVID, I could not be with this editor who was a new editor. He didn't know my style, and a lot of it I had already set up because I wanted these very strong, there are some very dynamic cuts in the film. And so those I had already set up, and so, but still, so he did a version of the film. I wasn't happy. Then I took it, took it from him, and then I edited, and I actually land up just doing that with every film, whether it's Indian or abroad, because finally, I guess for an editor, the film is written. For a director, the film is written. For documentaries, are written on the table. However much you might have scripted it or planned it. A lot of it just happens on the editing table. And so I wanted this kind of a fluidity, and he was much more like, he was a different editor, and his editing helped me in some ways, but I also wanted some this other quality, this more fluid quality. So yeah, and so I just used his cut, and and did that's what I did. Yeah.
So the film is, I found, very empathetic to the lives of the workers. You said somebody said it was cold. I didn't find that at all, and this is my third viewing or 2.5 viewings. It's a very restrained and unsentimental look at the lives of people whose lives are quite precarious, and
Yeah.
they might lose their jobs, and it's a hard work and poorly paid. But the one moment when I felt a sudden nostalgia creeps in is when that machine is lifted. And perhaps it's just the music. The shot is so evocative. I feel that maybe you didn't need anything. But the reason why that's a small little problem is also because it represents the end of an industrial era, as you said too. And the lot of the industrial worker was never a happy one. And also the machines are made in England, so it's... So was that something that you thought about carefully? Are you happy with the way in which that ending is?
I really like it. I mean, I feel it's sort of a cinematic achievement as far as I'm concerned, when you can feel emotion from the worker by seeing a dead machine. So, which is a difficult thing to achieve. So for me, it works. And because when you see the machine going out, it's a corpse of the machine, but you're thinking about all the workers, all the weavers who will lose their jobs. So for me, that, and you think about like hundreds and thousands of people who have worked on these machines. So it kind of takes me back into the history. Now, regarding industrialization, so I feel like I am not one of those people who think it's completely evil. And also the conditions of workers were much better earlier. So I don't want to romanticize the industrialization, but I also don't want to, look at it critically, because where would we be? I mean, there was a lot of nation building that was required at the time of independence, and jute was very much part of it, I mean, it was like millions of people worked in this industry, and a lot of people who came here were fighting starvation, famine, etc. So it meant livelihood. So I want to see it from that point of view, and it's not nostalgia for colonization as maybe you interpreted it. That idea didn't come into my head.
No, I didn't quite interpret, but the music sort of closes different interpretations of that one shot, which otherwise... No, for me, I mean, so let's throw it open to the audience. That's maybe a nice moment to do that. Yeah. Is there a mic going around? Does anybody have any questions, comments? Yeah, there we are. There's one. Usha. I don't know who else.
Thank you, Nishtha. It was an extremely immersive and actually very moving film. And it's not really a question, but I just want to say that what I got from it was the kind of intimate connection between the body, the human body, whether it is the growing of the wheat or the making of the gunny sack itself. I think you've managed to bring that very close, that it's like almost like an extension of their body. So it's that embodied kind of relationship they have, good or bad, even if they're being exploited, somehow it's part of that. And that decision to include Vishwakarma at the end is just fantastic. I just wanted to ask you just more like a general kind of a editing question. I felt that it flows beautifully, but there were some moments which to me seemed a little bit, maybe I was a bit confused as to why they're there. So this is just a personal question. Did you feel attached to some shots, or did you feel attached to some sequences that you felt you had to bring in, or was there a tussle with your editor? I'm just curious.
Difficult right now to say. I didn't have a tussle with the editor. I just wanted a little more sort of lyrical and poetical quality to it. For example, I'll give you an example. There is a shot of the boys pulling, doing exercise, and then I have a sound of the factory coming in, and then I have people moving. Now that is something like I do. He wasn't very fond of the idea, but when he saw it later on with the sound design, he really liked that cut. But at the editing itself, he wasn't very convinced about it. But these are such personal and subjective things. Some people may like it or not like it. But there were other. We didn't have a tussle as such. Yeah. And then I added this sequence in the end. With them working, like the scraping of the iron and those things. He didn't put it. I put it. Even Rakesh, who was shooting it, he said, "Why do you want it?" I said, "No, I want it." But I didn't have a very clear idea why I wanted it. But when it came into the film, it became very clear to me, because what was already what was fascinating is that these old machines were still working, and I think somewhere that was, they all work because of this, there is one part on which the entire industry, runs. And that one part is common to all the machines. And so for me, that idea that, they're able to really use these 120-year-old or even older machines, that was quite, okay, that was a sort of a fascination, that they're still jugaad, in India, and they do it. But there was a virtue to this jugaad, in the sense that the ideas of degrowth, because we're always talking about, technology advancement, but technology advancement means loss of labor. There are some improvements or whatever, but also the machines much, break down, etc. For me, this industrial period was, it's fascinating in the sense that they were able to reuse, and, there was less wastage. So that idea I wanted to, that you can sometimes continue with this infrastructure, and there is hundreds of mills out there, and the infrastructure is wasted, and they're just waiting so then they can sell it as real estate. But actually, why not make it into like jute cooperatives or whatever? There are other ways of using this. It doesn't have to go waste. So, I thought that, when I put this sort of a sequence in the film, it'll become like a talking point about that everything, advance is not necessarily good. We can think about the common good, in different ways. So, I don't know if I've actually, did I answer your question or not, but yeah.
Anybody else? Oh, there's one there and one there.
Thank you, Nishtha. What
Hi.
a beautiful, lyrical, beautiful, beautiful film. Highly emotional, deeply touching. Thank you. My question would be that since it's such a lyrical film, to find a rhythm to the entire film, there's a rhythm to the film, and it runs through the whole film. So I'm really curious about getting to that rhythm, and what was your process around that rhythm, because even the music has been used so beautifully. So, I mean, it's more like a lived experience, I imagine, but the rhythm itself runs so beautifully. I'm just curious about how did you get to that?
Yeah, I mean, when I started looking at the footage which Rakesh shot, I earlier was shooting with Deepthi, then several camera people before I actually got funding. And then I noticed there was something very different in his footage. It itself had this sort of a kinetic energy, and there were a lot of circles, there were a lot of movements, it was there. And when I looked at the footage, I would tell him, Rakesh, this is really working well, can we go for this? So I gave him themes. And we found also people, moving like this. Why are they moving? And then we realized it's because of the thread. They're keeping close watch on the thread, and they forget, and their necks are moving, etc. And then a lot of, we started finding themes, like old age, people, movement, bodies moving, etc. So I told him, let's get more of this, because I can work with this. and like even the birds, when the siren went, the birds would go around. So, all of that, and the, people moving on the side, and all the industrial town is around. So, there's a lot of movement around, etc. So we started finding a lot of sort of a cyclical quality, plus the cycle itself as a symbol of, early nationhood. So, these were the kind of things I was working with. So when I set up the editing, I set up the editing with these ideas and notions rather than a narrative. Like, normally, okay, what are we trying to say this film? And this is the information, this is the information. Instead, I said, I'm going to do it like this. So, yeah, that was, but it was really came through watching the footage, editing sequences. And then music was so difficult because, getting the right kind of, funding allows you to work with music composers from abroad. And I think this was the biggest advantage of getting those funding. Editing sometimes doesn't work for me. I'd rather work with editors in India, especially because of language, especially the new film, the farming film. We had hundreds of hours of footage. It was much better to work in India, but I was, working abroad, which was not really good because then again I edited the film myself. But for music, I feel like, because we managed to get instrumentalists who were Indian. So there is, the instrumentalists are, playing cello, but Indian, and the music composer is composing on the West. So, combination of the harmonics from Western music with Indian instrumentation, while it was difficult, is what I wanted, and sometimes it's very difficult to achieve here, unless you're working with A.R. Rahman or something like that, which we can't. So that I just felt like, I really, really pushed my my music composer to give me this music, that nostalgic piece.
Only the end. I said only the end. I love the beginning, the title sequence. It's only that last bit.
I said my reference point is Satyajit Ray in this, So gave him, really references to work with. But even there is a piece of music in the film which is Charyar for the kids. But it was like he came up with that, or I think the instrumentalist came up with this Charyar kind of a thing. I don't know whether that music works or not in a way, but or it doesn't match because there's a lot of different kind of archival music as well in the film, So yeah, but that part was really beautiful to work and challenging and ultimately satisfying.
There were three other questions. One is that, yeah, right, just there, yeah.
Yeah, you said in the beginning that you wanted to make it like an operatic kind of visual effect. It worked superbly like that because opera is affect, it's passion, it's emotion, and all of that came through so beautifully. Thank you. I had a lovely Sunday morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just want to say that it was very, very moving. And, when I saw the bicycles, I thought of Gandhiji. So for me, it was, I'm really deeply touched by it.
Thank you.
Good for you.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed the film and learning more about the perspective of the workers. I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little more about your negotiations with the owner of the factory, and did they have any conditions? Did they want to be interviewed, or did they turn down your request for interview?
None of that. I think what I was telling you in the beginning, right? Lata Bajoria, who's really passionate about jute, and she's seen my films. She was very impressed with me, and she was okay. So she gave me a carte blanche to shoot in the, so this was amazing. Like, there was nobody like telling us, don't shoot this, don't shoot that. We had access. So there was, and they never said, what are you going to show in the film? Nothing like that. I told her it's about jute workers, but I knew I was going to run into trouble in the end because I started noticing that while she loves jute, and she loves the idea of environment and eco-friendliness, she didn't have much compassion for the workers. So we had already run into this. So I thought, oh, well, she's not stopping me, so I'll continue to do what I do. Finally, when she saw the film, she was a bit disappointed because she thought it's going to be sort of a promotional for jute. I don't know, she imagined it herself. So she was a bit disappointed. And then when I went there to actually show the film to the workers, the police stopped us. You know, I wanted to show it in the it's called they are called the labor lines. So we were not allowed to show the film in the labor lines. So you know, with my protagonist, I've shared it on Vimeo, and I'm maybe in January when I go there to Calcutta again. Plan to have a screening on a day when nobody is working, because that's also very difficult because everybody is working in different shifts. And a lot of people have moved on, etc., because the film took so long to make. So have a screening for the workers, but outside the labor lines, outside the jute area, otherwise it won't be allowed. So that's when actually I realized what, because I had free access, which didn't, I mean, one knows that there has been repression of the police whenever there were protests, etc. We have known that, and the trade union movement has also died down, compromised. That's why the conditions are so bad. But I didn't expect that I would not be allowed to have a screening. And in terms of negotiation, it was really a negotiation with, a lot of the negotiation is on camera, like, you know, a lot of time I don't like to tell people to do this or move this way. So all that is just pure cinema verite. So whatever arrangement I do, like, you know, fictionalizing of it happens in the editing. But during the shoot, I don't move anyone. I don't ask anyone to move or talk, you know, be in any way. We just fit into their situation. So sometimes, for example, in the beginning, you know, as we were walking behind the worker, he wasn't aware that Rakesh has, you know, started moving behind him. He was moving behind a lot of workers coming out. And then, you know, again trying to do the shot. So this fellow wasn't aware, but, you know, I decided to use the shot because on shot you see a kind of a negotiation that is happening, you know. He's making space. Instead of saying, like, why are you shooting me? Instead, you know, he moves on the side, making space for the camera person to go ahead, but then he realizes that he wants to be behind me, etc. So I try to keep that negotiation process within the film itself, you know, so that, yeah, but I wanted to...
Lokesh has a question. Yeah, you wanted to?
No, but I'll come to it. Talk about the sound design.
Yeah, we will.
Thank you. Marvelous film. First one is, are there any diseases associated with inhalation of jute fiber? Because when you say golden thread, there's a lot of fiber in the air, number one. Second thing is you say a lot of the jute mills are closing down and the power goes off. That was, what was that? There was a power shutdown. So was that natural? What happened then? But the story, the question was unanswered.
But
Yeah,
I just used that moment to go to a next this thing. But yeah, it was just a short power breakdown, and then it came also. You see that in the shot. But I use that as an effect of, you know, as an effect. So, but to answer your question about diseases, so it depends on the factories. Actually, the amount of fiber dust in the air can be controlled by putting a bit of oil and watering the jute and actually putting a kind of a oil on the fiber. So some of the mills cost cut by not using that oil. Because it can be considerably less. So this is the way, you know, they'll try to cost cut, etc., which can affect... I didn't come across, but there are not so many cases of tuberculosis. And also when people stop working, but there are more cases of, I mean, there are accidents that happen. Those are quite common. And a lot of people are also, there's a lot of substance abuse because the work is very hard. So there's a lot of substance abuse. And I'm sure there are, but it's not so many cases of TB, but asthma and stuff like that. But they are supposed to wear the mask, but it's very difficult with the heat and humidity to actually put on the mask. They also, throw out the shoes and things. So it's not because there are not regulations, but it's very difficult to do this hard kind of work to, not being able to breathe. So there are all these, considerations as well. And I couldn't find the exact statistics on the diseases. I must say I should find it for further screen because few people have been asking, but I haven't been able to get any kind of, thing, yeah. And the biggest problem is the sound. So if you went inside these mills and you came out, that the machines would be buzzing in your ears for hours. Like you couldn't take out the sound from your ears. So that deafening, that happens, and your tone, you're always speaking at a slightly higher tone, so that becomes your the high-pitched tone. People speak in that high-pitched tone because that's how they're also speaking inside. So
maybe you could use that to,
use that as segue to talk about the sound design of
which
the
we left
film.
off.
For me, when I noticed that these are such old machines, and what was very interesting was that even though they are like prototype machines, each machine had a very different rhythm, different from its like partner, like the machine next. And that's what gave me the design, gave me the idea. And I told Neeraj, the sound designer whom I worked, this is I think our 7th film or something, I told him that, there's a sort of this, it's like an orchestra of machines. And so, from then on, he told me, how to get the sounds, mic, this, that, and the other. We paid a lot of attention, much more attention on recordings of the sounds. Yeah, yeah, and so like he's decided, like, in terms of themes in the film. So then he decided, I'm going to block out all the sound. We'll just use the cycle sound, and I thought it was brilliant. Instead of just entering into the noise, so sort of focus on elements. So we didn't talk about cycle as such, but we talk about it, like through this. So like the subliminal effect of sound is much more than actually words. So that's what sort of we worked with. But it was really noise, like thousands of machines at the same time. So, to isolate sounds it took months.
Yeah, I thought the disadvantage that you had with sound, you've used it in a very interesting way. Because, when those guys wearing the seniors in the white uniform, I suppose you mic'd one of them. And so you cut that talking. Often in documentary films, there's too much of talking, and you can do with less. So I thought that you've used that in very interesting ways. But I was just wondering, Nishtha, how, when you entered the film, when you got permission and you started filming, how did you visualize the construction of the film? You had some ideas. Did you get into thinking that you do an observational kind of film or follow characters? And how did it change along the way while you were filming with Rakesh?
Earlier I was filming with Deepthi. It would have been a slightly different film. We were planning to stage the interviews, but interestingly, we had done that before in City of Photos. We were planning that because I just didn't want it normal, like, sitting somewhere. And it was difficult because it was so noisy. And also when the camera comes in, then people, because when they are off work, then they all surround. When they are at work, they're not going to surround because they have to work. So as soon as you're outside, and people will just come and say, oh, what are people saying? So then I couldn't get, we tried so much. So I knew that. And also, what I was telling Gautam yesterday was that, when they talk about themselves, because they feel the need to express their pathos, sometimes it becomes pathetic than remain pathos. So for me, it was very important to show the pathos in the film. And to be able to do it much better than they sometimes they would do it for themselves. Sometimes, of course, they speak very well about it, but sometimes it's the same thing, it's about wages, this, that, and the other. So I've used that part. And So I said, let me create that with the minimalism, that would be more effective than have more people say the same things in a way.
Constructing the film when you first started, what were
See,
your
the
ideas?
proposal में तो ये था कि it will be I use words like this is like it's like a stage, and workers are performers. So those ideas were there, but there was another idea which was the labor of filmmaking itself. So I wanted to I wanted to film Rakesh also working with them, and I could not do that because COVID hit. So that part of the film went out because that would have given a very interesting, because the way I used to look at, the relationship of the workers with Rakesh, that was also really nice, So I wanted a bit of that also, and also to point out to the labor of, so those ideas, because the filmmaking also, films also started, film camera, the still camera came when the jute, and then the beginning of the film is also the Lumiere brother film, the workers coming out of the factory. And then you have modern times, and then you have Giga Bartov. So there are a whole lot of films that also you go through, with this. So from modern times, mechanization, and alienation, etc. So there are sort of, it's kind of loaded with references in that sense. Whoever gets it doesn't, it's okay, So for me, the labor of film was also important. So that part, those were the kind of things that I couldn't do in the end because of COVID, and I had to then, because I had already taken too long, so I had to wrap up the film.
So Nishtha, I don't know how much time we have, but can I ask you one more question following up on Sunanda's? Were you ever tempted to follow one character or one or two characters rather than, I mean, some of them stand out certainly, but you don't follow them through the film as many people want one to do.
No, I didn't want that. I didn't want that at all. I wanted it to be and actually the raising money for the film became very difficult precisely because I said, for me, it's the mill is the character, the industrial area is the character, not a worker, but I want many workers. I want young and old, I want the generational aspect, because no one worker would be able to carry different aspects, female, male. So this made it very difficult to get funding for the film. So that's why it took much longer. But that was very clear it was going to be a collective. Like a baton passing on from one to the other. So I could bring in many aspects.
Maybe, is that the last question, Sunana? Do we have time or 3 more?
Thank you so much, ma'am. It's poetry in motion, and all that machinery, you make it look so delicate, and especially as already people have mentioned the light and the fiber effect. What sounded threatening was sounding so beautiful that I felt like getting a whiff of it in between sometime. So the question is with respect to the two characters. One is the singer and one is the sadhuji. So how did you manage to get that? Like, did they know there will be a piece for them? Is it before when the singer was in his performance and then he was at work, and then the sadhuji who was at like he was being what he was, and then he was at work? So which happened before and after? Because that was very interesting for me.
No, obviously we found them in the factory.
Obviously, I mean to say the shots.
But in editing, I put them reverse.
Okay.
So when, but the singer I found, the singer I found in the karaoke room, जो labor का karaoke room था, the singer I found there, and then we shot with him later in the mill. So, but with the sadhu, we found him in the mill first. But in the film, that order is reversed. We see him, and then we see him in the, mill. But in the mill, we're like, why is the sadhu working in the mill? So, basically, it's like a giant mill, and there is no work, So this actually shows how industrialization, there's a huge unemployment crisis, and jute mills still remain the main sources for most people, and they come from really far, spending 2 hours, 3 hours to reach these mills, so which is quite crazy. So sadhu ko bhi karna padta tha kaam. So I said, didn't you earn enough from, But then I noticed he was just getting like 10 rupees for giving those cloves, and So yeah, it was just interesting, how there's so many different colors to the mill as well. These characters, yeah.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
Again, a wonderful movie, but documentary. But I mean, they've spoken about the details. They asked you about the details, but I just want to know, how did this idea come to you? What emerged in your head to make this documentary? That is one. And the second one I would want to ask you is, has there been any reception of the documentary? Any sort of movement, anything, any talks regarding this? How has the response been for the documentary?
Okay.
It's been screened all over the world, so yeah.
No,
Okay.
I mean, has there been any sort of, any sort of action taken, any sort of, movement, anything at all?
I don't know what action, what movement. I mean, no. No. No is the answer for the second thing. The film has not been used for impact. If that's what you're asking, what's the impact? So there's been no, as yet, no impact campaign around this because right now it's just been in festival. I'll have to design an impact campaign to take it to workers. It requires more funding, etc. And finding somebody who could take it around. The first question was, how does this idea come, per se? So it develops over it develops over years, an idea, and eventually how it's shot and edited. So it's not. I mean, going through that would be really difficult right now. But yeah, and it's also what you've done before, what kind of films you've done before, what you want to try out. So it kind of ties up with many, many things, So film is also in dialogue with my previous film. This is my third films on workers. One was on domestic worker, one was on migrant workers. This is my first factory worker film. And also because I feel that there is not enough films in India about workers. Everybody wants to talk about communalism, which is important right now because there is a lot of communal hatred, etc. But we are not talking enough about the working class, the poor working conditions. This is in fact much better than how most workers actually, if you go into small factories, etc., they are much worse, working conditions, and they're absolutely. This is still good, I would say. There is still light, in the mills. There's still an open area. Otherwise, you should see the kind of spaces with no windows, with no air, and so this is still better. So the one that the working class has gone out of Indian cinema altogether. I think the last film we saw was Kala Patthar or something, So mainstream cinema se to chala hi gaya hai. Mainstream cinema has become all about these middle class or rich people, between cities and, abroad. So what was there? Do Biga Zameen and all those films were there, There was a certain discussion, these people were part. But right now, we do not talk about the working class at all. So this was very important. This is very important for me. I feel personally like my political position is if we are so comfortable with inequalities, then we are always going to fall into the gaps of communal hatred as well. Because they also tried to break up the workers through caste, through religion. Most of the weavers, for example, are Muslim. There's a lot of Muslim people, and it was a secular industry which they tried to, break up again, So stuff like this. So this is what I feel.
We should probably wrap up. Is that Sunana? Okay. Yeah. Also, it's not so much a call to action. This film, it's more a reflection on a whole period of industrialization. Anyway. Thank you so much for showing your film, for coming. And thank you everyone for staying. We didn't have too many people to start with, but most of you have stayed back, though it's Onam and etc. So thank you, and come for the next one.
Thank you.